The Texas sun hung low, casting golden shadows across Johnson Ranch where Mabel Johnson, 68, worked her fence line. To casual observers, she was just another black rancher. Tough, resilient, but unremarkable in worn denim and straw hat. But Mabel carried secrets beneath her weathered exterior. The hands that mended fences had once cradled a Barrett .50 caliber rifle with surgical precision. The eyes that scanned for stray cattle had once tracked targets across desert landscapes from impossible distances. Today, those skills would be tested again. The sound came first, a deep rumble of multiple vehicles approaching fast. Through the dust cloud, black SUVs emerged in tactical formation. 14 armed men stepped out, led by Carlos, whose expensive clothes couldn't hide his cartel affiliation. "Mrs. Johnson," Carlos called, "we have business. This land sits on something valuable. We've come to collect what's ours." Mabel kept her hands visible, posture relaxed but ready. "This is private property. Deeds recorded for 20 years. You're trespassing." The implications hit like physical blows. This wasn't random intimidation. It was systematic theft disguised as business negotiation. The casual confidence in Carlos's voice spoke of experience with people who crumbled under pressure. Mabel had spent her life refusing to play roles written by others. "I warned you," she said quietly, pressing a button on a small remote. Nothing obvious happened, no alarms, no weapons emerged. But Carlos's men looked less certain. Their advance halted as they realized this situation had just become more complicated than anticipated. Mabel Johnson wasn't always a rancher. Born in 1956 in segregated Marshall, Texas, she learned early that the world saw her differently because of her black skin. Her father, a WPI veteran who fought for freedom overseas only to return to Jim Crow laws, taught survival through invisibility. "Keep your head down, baby," he would say. "Sometimes the smartest move is letting them think you're not paying attention." But Mabel couldn't keep quiet. At 16, she intervened when white men cornered her brother James behind the local diner. Carlos Thompson, known for violence and sheriff connections, had grabbed James when Mabel stepped between them. "Leave him alone," she said steadily. "He didn't do anything to you." Thompson's eyes narrowed. "You got a smart mouth, girl. Maybe someone needs to teach you manners." What happened next became local legend. Mabel didn't flinch, didn't back down. She memorized faces, noted the truck license plate. "You touch me or my brother, and you'll explain to the sheriff why you assaulted teenagers behind the diner." The bluff worked, but barely. Thompson backed down, muttering threats and racial slurs. That night, as her father hugged them, Mabel made a decision. "I'm going to learn to fight." Learn to shoot. Become someone they can't intimidate. Her father stared, fear and pride warring. "The world will eat you alive if you fight it head on," he whispered. "Then I'll change it from the inside," Mabel replied. The following years were masterclass persistence. While friends planned weddings, Mabel earned a criminal justice degree while working library double shifts. She aced the military entrance exam, shocking everyone by joining the Army. Basic training was brutal, often the only black woman in her unit. Instructors questioned if she was cut out for combat roles. Fellow soldiers made affirmative action jokes despite her superior performance. But Mabel volunteered for every challenging assignment, excelled in every qualification. When Special Forces opportunity came, she took it despite knowing no black woman had completed selection. The Q course broke people through physical exhaustion, mental stress, sleep deprivation. Mabel endured it all, her father's words echoing. When she graduated, she didn't just make history as first black woman with Green Beret. She shattered expectations. Her sniper designation came naturally. Patience, precision, calm under pressure. The next 20 years read like classified files. Deployments to unacknowledged places. Shots taken that saved lives. She earned reputation as the Ghost. So skilled enemies didn't realize they were under fire until too late. The two men approached the house with casual confidence. Mabel watched them from her peripheral vision, noting their tactical spacing and weapon positioning. 30 yards away, 20, 15. The lead man grabbed the door handle, expecting it to open. Instead, he found it locked. His expression shifted from casual to irritated. "Locked," he called back. "And windows look reinforced." Carlos's expression darkened. "Break it down," he ordered. We don't have time for this. The man turned back, hand moving to his weapon. 10 yards away. This was the moment. Mabel's thumb found the second button on her remote control. The response was immediate. From the barn came the sharp crack of a rifle shot. A Barrett .50 caliber that Mabel had positioned months ago for exactly this scenario. The precision was surgical. The lead man's weapon went flying as the bullet struck it with exact force to disarm, without causing fatal injury. He screamed, clutching his shoulder and spinning to the ground. The second shot came from the equipment shed. A different angle, different rifle, same precision. This time the bullet struck the vehicle engine block, disabling it without harming occupants. The message was unmistakable. Mabel could kill them whenever she chose. She was choosing mercy. Chaos erupted. Carlos's men scattered, diving for cover behind their SUVs, returning fire without clear targets. The confidence from their arrival evaporated, replaced by confusion from having the script rewritten mid-performance. What the hell is this? Carlos screamed, his cultured accent cracking. Who are you people? Through the scope of her rifle, Mabel watched him realize the truth. He wasn't dealing with a civilian who got lucky with defensive preparations. He was facing someone who had once been among the most dangerous people on the planet. Someone for whom tactical engagement was as natural as breathing. The third shot took out the radio antenna on Carlos's vehicle. The fourth disabled another SUV's engine. Each shot was placed with the precision of a surgeon, demonstrating capability rather than desperation. Stand down. Mabel's voice carried command authority across the yard. Lay down your weapons and leave while you still can. But Carlos couldn't simply retreat. His reputation was built on taking what he wanted without consequences. Retreating from an elderly black woman would mark him as weak in a business where weakness was fatal. Kill her, he screamed. Kill them all. Burn it to the ground. The shooting intensified, but Mabel's response remained controlled and methodical. She moved laterally, creating angles, using her buildings as defensive positions that gave tactical advantage. The barn, equipment shed, main house, each became part of a defensive network that turned her property into what military tacticians called a killing field, without the killing part. One man made a break for the barn. Mabel had anticipated this move, deliberately creating the opening that would tempt someone to try it. The shot that stopped him was perfect, high on the thigh, causing maximum pain while missing the femoral artery. He went down screaming, clutching his leg and rolling in dirt. His weapon skittered away, useless. Last chance, Mabel called clearly. Leave now or I stop being merciful. The silence was heavy with implication. Carlos's men had stopped shooting, weapons lowered as they waited for instructions that would determine whether they lived or died. The wounded men's screams carried across the ranch, advertising what would happen to anyone else who chose to continue. Carlos saw the writing on the wall. He was dealing with someone who operated on a level he couldn't match. Someone whose definition of mercy was more terrifying than most people's definition of cruelty. Retreat, he said finally, the word tasting like ash. Get the wounded. We leave now. The withdrawal was ragged and undisciplined, nothing like the precision of their arrival. Men helped wounded comrades into vehicles, eyes never leaving the buildings that contained the source of their humiliation. Engines started, doors slammed, and gradually the SUVs began reversing, backing away from the house and the woman who had demonstrated she was far more dangerous than they had anticipated. The aftermath was both quieter and more complicated than Mabel expected. County Sheriff Deputy Raymond Torres arrived within the hour, responding to multiple 911 calls from neighbors who had heard the shooting. Torres was local born and raised, with solid moral center from parents who taught right from wrong regardless of race. But Mabel knew being good and being able to do something about it were different things. Mabel, he said, climbing out with hand resting casually on his weapon. Not threatening, just automatic caution. You okay? We got reports of heavy shooting out here. Mabel stepped from the porch where she had been waiting, hands visible and empty. She had changed clothes but couldn't hide the evidence. Bullet holes in her barn. Blood stains on ground. General atmosphere where violence had visited and left its mark. I'm fine. Raymond, she said steadily, but we need to talk. And you're probably going to want to call for backup. This is bigger than what happened here today. Torres's expression shifted to something more serious as he took in the scene, the tactical positions Carlos's men had used, the precision of bullet holes that spoke of professional shooting rather than random panic. He radioed for backup and additional units, then turned back to Mabel. "Why don't you tell me what happened here?" Starting from the beginning. The story that emerged was both simpler and more complex than Torres expected. Simple part was tactical sequence. Arrival, attempted invasion, systematic defense driving them off without fatalities despite overwhelming odds. Complex part was what it meant about corruption reaching into their community. Assumptions these men had made about who was powerful and who was not. "You're saying they were cartel?" Torres asked, voice carrying weight of understanding implications. "Here, in our county? I'm saying they were professionals who expected to take what they wanted without consequences," Mabel replied carefully. "I'm saying they were surprised when a black woman didn't just hand over her property and beg for mercy. I'm saying they made assumptions about who was dangerous and who wasn't, and those assumptions cost them. But the real revelation came when Torres started processing the scene. The precision of shooting, tactical awareness evident in defensive positions, way the engagement had been managed to minimize casualties, all spoke of training far beyond normal rancher experience. "Where did you learn to shoot like this?" Torres asked, examining a bullet hole that had passed through a vehicle window and disabled the engine without harming the occupant. Mabel weighed how much to tell him, how much of her past to reveal, how much of the story needed sharing for truth to be understood. "I was Special Forces," she said finally. 20 years. Retired Master Sergeant, sniper designation, multiple deployments. Shot people for the government in places you've never heard of at distances you wouldn't believe." Torres stared, expression unreadable. "You're Mabel Johnson. You run a ranch. You grow vegetables for church food bank. You teach Sunday school." "I was Mabel Johnson before any of those things," she replied. "The ranch, the vegetables, the church, they're who I chose to become. But they don't erase who I was before." The breakthrough came when Agent Maria Rodriguez arrived from Federal Drug Enforcement Administration. Rodriguez was part of a task force tracking Carlos's organization for months, building a case beyond simple trafficking, waiting for opportunity to strike that would be legally sound and publicly defensible. "You just gave us that opportunity," Rodriguez explained, reviewing evidence Torres and deputies collected. "These men crossed a line. They attempted to invade a private home, assault American citizens, use violence to further criminal enterprise. That's not just trafficking anymore, that's domestic terrorism. But Rodriguez needed Mabel's cooperation, testimony, identification, stepping forward publicly to identify herself as victim of what federal government prepared to call terrorist attack on American soil. "I've spent 20 years trying to leave that life behind," Mabel said quietly. "I've built something here that's mine, that has nothing to do with what I used to be. If I do this, that becomes impossible. This decision affects Nia too," Mabel said. "Whatever I choose, she has to live with consequences." Nia's response was both surprising and inevitable. "Grandma, I always knew there was more to your story. I knew you were more than you seemed. But this isn't just about you anymore. This is about what kind of world we want to live in. If you don't fight them, if you don't stand up and say this isn't okay, then they win." The federal task force assembled over following weeks was unlike anything rural Texas had seen. Agents from DEA, FBI, ATF, and Homeland Security set up operations in the county, transforming quiet community into staging area for what was described as largest anti-cartel operation in American history. But Mabel provided expertise making the operation successful. Her understanding of tactical planning, knowledge of professional operations, insight into mindset of people using violence as tool, all proved invaluable to agents who fought organized crime, but had never participated in it. "We're not just taking down Carlos," Rodriguez explained during planning sessions. "We're dismantling the entire network. Money laundering, political corruption, property acquisition, enforcement operations. This goes far beyond one cartel cell. The operation that followed was methodical and comprehensive. Carlos's organization had been tracked for months, But Mabel's experience provided final puzzle piece, understanding how to strike to dismantle entire network rather than remove leadership layer. When arrests came, they involved not just cartel members but local officials complicit in operations. Sheriff who looked away, commissioner who approved mineral leases, judge who signed warrants, all swept up in federal dragnet Mabel's courage made possible. But Mabel never lost sight of what started it all: simple defense of home, refusal to be intimidated, choosing to fight against impossible odds because alternative was accepting some people were disposable. The trial was spectacular and anticlimactic. Dozens of defendants, hundreds of charges, evidence spanning multiple countries, but most resolved through plea deals ensuring major players would spend lives in federal custody. The real resolution came in changes rippling outward. Federal investigation revealed systematic corruption, allowing cartel operations with impunity. Local officials were replaced, law enforcement protocols rewritten, assumptions governing rural Texas life challenged and changed. For Mabel, resolution brought both satisfaction and loss. She helped dismantle operation preying on community, contributed to broader understanding of cartel influence, corrupting American institutions. But she lost anonymity cherished for 20 years. Her story became national news, international news, subject of documentaries and books. The ranch continued operating differently now. Visitors came not just for produce but to meet women who became symbol of resistance. Veterans came sharing stories of service, thanking her for demonstrating skills learned could be used for protection rather than predation. Community members expressed gratitude and ensured she knew she wasn't alone in chosen fight. Most significant change was harder to measure: how Mabel's story spread through veteran community, transforming individual heroism to collective inspiration. Other former service members began sharing stories of using military training to protect communities. Networks formed of trained professionals understanding their skills had value beyond personal defense and willing to use that value collectively. Federal government created new programs connecting veterans with law enforcement fighting organized crime. Her insights into tactical planning, professional operations knowledge, real-world confrontation, understanding became part of broader effort to professionalize fight against cartel influence in American communities. But Mabel never forgot what started it all: simple act of defending home, refusal to be intimidated, choosing to fight impossible odds because alternative was accepting disposable lives, negotiable justice, powerless people. The aftermath reshaped more than Mabel's life. It transformed understanding of veteran capabilities in civilian protection. Her story spread beyond Texas borders, reaching veterans nationwide who recognized similar potential within themselves. The Johnson Ranch became unofficial headquarters for what would become known as the Veterans Protection Network. Former service members using military skills to defend communities against organized crime. Local law enforcement, initially skeptical, began recognizing value. Deputy Torres later admitted, "We couldn't have done it without her. She knew how they thought, how they operated, how to dismantle their entire system." The federal government formalized programs connecting veterans with agencies fighting cartel influence. Mabel's insights became training material for agents who previously fought crime without understanding military-style operations. But personal costs were significant. The anonymity she cherished vanished completely. Media attention brought both support and unwanted scrutiny. Some neighbors who once saw her as kindly rancher now looked at her with unease. Remembering the precision of those shots, Naya handled transformation with resilience, becoming advocate for cartel violence victims, eventually attending law school to specialize in international drug policy. She explained simply, "You taught me we don't choose battles that find us, but we choose how we fight them." The ranch itself evolved, no longer just agricultural operation but educational facility teaching tactical defense, community organizing, civil rights protection. Veterans came to learn, stayed to teach, created network of trained professionals sharing expertise. The Veterans Protection Network expanded to 23 states, with former service members using skills to protect communities. Federal funding followed, recognizing that veterans possessed unique capabilities criminal organizations couldn't match. Local communities reported significant decreases in cartel-related activity wherever network operated. Policy changes rippled outward. New oversight for private security companies, stricter regulations on financial relationships between law enforcement and probation services, mandatory bias training addressing assumptions about rural property owners. But Mabel measured success differently, by the young people who came to learn, by the communities organizing their own defense, by the veterans finding purpose in civilian protection rather than private security work. The corruption investigation she helped spark led to convictions reaching state government levels. Officials who approved shady mineral leases, judges signing questionable warrants, law enforcement taking cartel bribes, all faced federal charges. More importantly, it exposed how racial assumptions enabled criminal operations. Carlos's men assumed elderly black woman would be easy victim because they couldn't imagine black competence, female capability, or elderly resistance. Their assumptions cost them their freedom. The story became case study in law enforcement training about bias and its operational consequences. Mabel testified before Congress about veteran reintegration, community protection, and the costs of underestimating citizens based on race and gender. The story of Mabel Johnson's confrontation with the cartel reveals more than individual heroism. It exposes how prejudice can blind people to competence standing before them. Carlos's men made assumptions about an elderly black woman that proved fatal to their operation. They couldn't imagine the rancher before them had once been among the world's most dangerous people because their worldview didn't include that possibility. This story matters because it demonstrates how quickly assumptions turn deadly, how prejudice erases capability until reality forces recognition. Mabel's experience shows that the skills veterans develop don't lose value when they return to civilian life. That training can serve protection rather than predation when properly directed. But most importantly, it reminds us that change happens when people stop accepting the roles others write for them. Mabel could have surrendered her land, could have accepted settlement money, could have retreated into private life. Instead, she chose to fight, not just for herself, but for every person told they were powerless, for every community written off as expendable, for every assumption deserving to be challenged. Her story continues resonating because similar assumptions persist about who is dangerous, who is capable, who deserves protection, who can be ignored. The cartel Carlos represented hasn't disappeared, just evolved. The corruption enabling them remains adaptable. But neither has the resistance Mabel inspired. The fight isn't won. The story isn't over. The work is never finished. But Mabel Johnson's refusal to be intimidated has become part of larger narrative about what happens when ordinary people decide extraordinary courage is necessary rather than exceptional. Her story shows us that our liberation is bound together, that safety requires solidarity, that justice demands action, that freedom means responsibility for others. This isn't a story with happy ending. It's one with honest ending, acknowledging remaining work while celebrating accomplished progress. Her story is our story, and it's not finished yet. Together we ensure next Mabel Johnson never defends alone. Together we build world we pretend already exists. Together we choose courage over fear, justice over safety, solidarity over silence.